So in the prior video we showed how to export the warpbreaks dataset from R onto our local machine, and now this video is going to show you how to get that file within SAS. So this particular video is going to go over the SAS Studio option, which is the web-based version of SAS. So here I'm in, as you can see, as of March 20th, this still has not been fixed by SAS. The registration issue, that is. So I'm going to log in. It might take a minute here. Alright, so now I'm in SAS Studio. To review the left-hand side, the pane here, there are really two places that you want to focus your attention. The first is server files and folders. You can, since this is on the cloud, you essentially have your own dedicated space on a SAS server, and so you know you can think of it as like your own PC where you can store files and that sort of thing. So if you go to Files, Home, you can see I have all these folders and all these data sets and that sort of thing. So the first step, I'm sorry, before I go on to that. The other thing I want to show you here is the libraries pane, which lists all your libraries. Now remember, the work library is your temporary library, so anything that's sent there or saved there within your session will not be available when you reopen SAS. So we'll go into the libraries in a little bit more detail here in a second, or in another video. So the first thing I wanted to show is within here we have this data folder, which I did create during the last class, I think, or maybe this is from another class. Actually, it was the BANA6043 2019 folder that I created. So you can see we've pulled in a few different data sets into this particular folder. I'll just create a temporary or kind of another folder just to illustrate the process. So if we want a new folder, probably can right click and hit new folder. You could probably access it through here. Yeah, a folder. So there are a couple different ways to create a new folder. I recommend creating a folder for your data, just for organization purposes, even though I'm not the best at organization. So we'll just create a new folder here. We'll call it BANA6043. Actually, I'll just call it Spring 19 Data. So I've created this folder. You can see this is probably not how I wanted to do it. I'm going to cancel, because what essentially is going to happen is it's going to create a subfolder underneath this folder, and instead I wanted it to be in my main directory. I'll just show that it probably didn't do what I wanted it, so now I have this folder under here. That's not what I was intending to do, so I'll delete this folder. Instead, click on your Files Home one before you do the new folder, and you can see here now I have the correct directory. So I'll do Spring 19 Data, save, and now I have a new folder here. So I'm going to essentially select that folder, and then you can see here you have this upload option. This is how we're going to get the CSV file from our local machine onto the SAS server. You could probably right click and click upload files. So there's a couple different ways to do it. Here we're in the folder we wanted to send the data. We'll choose our files. Remember, I output it to my desktop previously. So here's the warpbreaks CSV file. We'll upload that, and then you can see the warpbreaks data set is here on the SAS server. One important thing that I covered in class, but to reiterate, SAS doesn't recognize CSV files by itself. It only knows how to work with what are called SAS data files, which actually, if you look at this one, this is a SAS data file here. It's got the .SAS7BDAT extension. So essentially, the data need to be in a format that SAS knows how to work with and understand. So what you essentially need to do is import warpbreaks, the CSV file, into SAS as a SAS data file. And so there's the easiest way to do that is right-click on warpbreaks and then hit import data. I think this might also be available here in this particular drop-down, the icon here, the drop-down icon. So we'll click import data, and basically we'll have, well, it didn't recognize that. So you can either drag and drop, or you can select the file. So I'll drag and drop. A couple things here. This is kind of a point-and-click method for importing the data. SAS generates the code here in order to show you how it's actually importing it. The one thing that's important here, or the most important thing, is what you're outputting your data as. So by default, it calls it import, the actual data set, which isn't very useful. It's pretty vague. And then the library is always the work library, which is a temporary library. So what we want to do is change this to first change the data set itself. And then, here we have the library in order to do this, or in order to save the data. So I'm just going to put it in one of my permanent libraries. There's another video that shows you how to create a permanent SAS library within SAS Studio. So you have to check that in order to see how to create a permanent library. So here we're storing in the permanent library mylib under the dataset name warpbreaks. Actually, because this isn't, I'm actually going to scratch that and create a new library that points specifically to this folder, because I just created this folder and I don't have a library that points to it directly. So in order to create a new library, you essentially can go into the Libraries tab and click New Library here, and it'll bring up a box. Your libref is the name of your library. Remember, there are certain naming conventions, so I can't just type, N to infinity. It has to be 8 characters long at maximum, and then I can't also start with a number, so it tells us all these things. So I'm just going to call this Spring 19, and then I'm going to supply the path. So this is essentially where SAS is going to look for this particular library within the SAS server. So we're going to browse, open our files, and then we're going to point it to the folder we just created. So we're going to click OK here. The other thing that is useful to check is recreate this library at startup. This way you don't have to do this process every time you start SAS. So that's definitely a box you want to check. Then we press OK. I'm not sure why why I got that message, because it didn't exist before. But so this library now points to that particular folder. If I now going back to the import, I'm going to pick that particular library, and then I'm going to call this warpbreaks and click save. And then there are a few other options which I won't talk about. I won't talk about all of them. One I will talk about eventually is this guessing rows, but we'll cover that at a later date. So now that the renaming of the data set in the library has been updated, we can click the Run button here. F3 is the hotkey. So it's going to run and import the data as a data set. And also runs a proc contents, which tells us general information about the data set. You can see we have the three variables that we saw in R. You can see over in our permanent library this is available. One of the steps or the data set is located in the permanent library. In the in-class assignment, this is one of the screenshots that are required basically to show A, that you set up a permanent library, and B, you were successful in uploading the data to it. So that'll satisfy that requirement. And then remember, your permanent library always points to a location. So if we actually go to that location of that library, which is the original folder we created, Spring 19, you can see now we have a SAS data file that corresponds to that particular data set. So this video, that kind of concludes this video for completing the in-class assignment, uploading the CSV file, converting it to a SAS data file, and then also creating a permanent library within SAS.